Alrighty. You ready to get into On the Ice?
Always, as always, man. Let's
All
get
right.
started.
Here you go.
There has been some crazy stuff that just happened today in the NHL, and I'm glad it popped before we did our episode tonight. And that is Bill Peters for the Calgary Flames. He was, I wouldn't say forced to resign, but he decided to resign. More like a force, in my opinion. As head coach, there was a lot of racial comments that came out regarding Bill Peters, and he definitely stepped aside. It was a smart choice on his behalf. I think it was a whole thing as an organization deciding to go separate ways. Obviously, though, nowhere in sports for that, in any sports, especially the NHL, in this standpoint, because it's such a diverse community where they're finally starting to get more of different races and everything into the sport. It was more, for the longest time, it was a white man sport. So it's glad that it's finally changing. You don't need that. You don't need that at all. Racism is just awful in general. And then you see this happen with a head coach, the guy who's supposed to lead your team. So I'm glad they decided to move on from that. There's no need for that in any case whatsoever. And the Calgary Flames made the right decision moving forward. Now, when we take a look at the standings, as we always do here in the week, not much has changed, but we have seen a little bit of catch up in the Eastern Conference. The Washington Capitals still lead in the Eastern Conference with 39 points. However, they are tied for first now with the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins now have 39 points as well. Both of those guys lead their two divisions, but they are tied in the Eastern Conference. Sitting in the wild card spots, we have Carolina and Philadelphia at 31 points. So there's about an 8-point gap between those, the wild card and the division leaders in the Eastern Conference. There's a lot of good play so far in the NHL so far. Some of the most disappointing teams that have sat in the Eastern Conference as we get about a quarter way through the season is the Detroit Red Wings, who have honestly just been completely awful, only sitting at 17 points on the season, 7-17-2. They're in a rebuild, but I don't know how well they're doing it, in my opinion. And the New Jersey Devils, probably the most shocking team, have Jack Hughes, the number one draft pick from this year. PK Subban came over there and just not doing well as well. 22 points, as we said last week. Corey Schneider went on waivers for them. How the mighty have fallen, we talked about, and they still continue that way. So 22 points for them and 17 points for Detroit, as I say, at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. But Washington's still carrying it, but Boston is sneaking right behind it. I think we're going to have some great Eastern Conference matchups in the playoffs if we continue to see this moving forward. But we're only a quarter way through the season. A lot of hockey still to discuss. On that Western Conference side, St. Louis Blues, your St. Louis guys, are still leading the way with 35 points. Not as many points as the Eastern Conference. Definitely have some more powerhouse teams over in the East so far this year. And they're only 1 point leading in the entire Western Conference, as the Edmonton Oilers are still right on their tail. Connor McDavid having a great season so far, and he's really showing it. Finally looks like he'll get some playoff bids after having a few rough years starting his career off with the Edmonton Oilers, and they look fantastic. St. Louis and Washington, though, still sit as your number one on each side of the conference. We could see that Stanley Cup that we keep talking about if it continues this way. But, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. If you look at the bottom teams for the Western Conference, it's teams that you have seen for years in the playoffs, and they just haven't stepped out. It's kind of like the Eastern Conference, too. You see Detroit Red Wings, and you're like, man, they were great for years and years in the playoffs. And then you look over the Western Conference the same way. At 22 points sits the Los Angeles Kings. They have a lot of older guys on the squad, and they need to rebuild fast if they want to continue to be in some kind of competition. If not, they're going to sit in the basement for a while. And then the Minnesota Wild, where Minnesota and hockey just go in tandem. And it's just not working very well for them this season. So a couple of surprising teams up and down the spectrum when you look at hockey. But when you look at the top of the leaderboard, it's really stayed consistent. All right, back to you.
I'm